Mark is 38. He earns $112,000 a year. He's sitting on his couch on a Wednesday night, 3 empty Uber Eats containers on the coffee table, scrolling. He just bought a $340 pair of running shoes he won't wear. He bought them 7 minutes ago. He doesn't run. This is the 3rd pair this month. Mark isn't stupid. He has a degree. He has a 401k, barely funded, but it's there. He knows what compound interest is. He's read the books. And he keeps doing this, buying things, returning them, buying them again. And he can't figure out why. Here's what he doesn't know. The thing emptying his bank account isn't a lack of discipline. It isn't a budgeting problem. It's not even, really, about money. The thing draining him is a feeling, a specific feeling with a specific biology that the modern economy has learned to milk like a vein. And if you've ever bought something at 11 p.m. and felt strange about it the next morning, you've been on the wrong side of it too. The word for what's happening to Mark is loneliness. Not sadness, not boredom, loneliness. The gap between the connection a person has and the connection they need. And it turns out loneliness is not just a mood, it's a physiological state. Your nervous system treats prolonged isolation roughly the way it treats hunger or cold, as a survival problem. Something has to be done about it, now. In May 2023, the US Surgeon General released an 81-page advisory calling loneliness a public health epidemic. About half of American adults reported experiencing it. Among people aged 15 to 24, time spent in person with friends had dropped roughly 70% over 2 decades. Single-person households went from 13% of all US households in 1960 to 29% in 2022, more than doubled. That's the backdrop. What's less obvious is what loneliness does to the way you spend money. And that's where things get strange. Start here. When the brain registers prolonged social disconnection, it activates a stress response. Cortisol levels rise. The amygdala, the part of the brain that processes threat, gets jumpier. Sleep gets worse. Inflammation goes up. The Surgeon General's report puts the long-term mortality risk of chronic loneliness in the same range as smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. That's not a metaphor. That's a number drawn from a synthesis of dozens of long-term studies. But the part that matters here, the financial part, is what happens to decision-making. A brain in a chronic stress state doesn't think well about the future. It can't. It's busy. It's scanning. It's looking for an immediate fix to whatever it thinks is wrong. So when a lonely brain meets a phone, and the phone offers a one-tap solution to feeling slightly better right now, a coffee, a sweater, a subscription, a ticket, that brain says yes, quickly, with less of an argument from the part of you that handles long-term planning. Some people will tell you loneliness lobotomizes your prefrontal cortex. That's overstated. The research is more careful than that. What it actually shows is that chronic loneliness is associated with shifts in brain regions involved in emotion regulation and self-control, and with weaker performance on some, but not all, tasks involving impulse control. A 2024 study in older adults found no clear link between loneliness and executive function at all. So the picture is messier than the YouTube version. But the direction of most of the evidence is consistent. A chronically lonely brain is, on average, worse at saying no to the thing that feels good right now. And that has a name in the academic literature. It's called compensatory consumption. Here's the part that should make you pause. Compensatory consumption isn't a fringe theory. It's a well-established line of research going back to the late 2000s. Studies have repeatedly shown that when people feel socially threatened, rejected, excluded, alone, they spend differently. They spend on things that signal status to others. They form emotional attachments to brands. They spend more on pets, especially the kind they can talk to. They show stronger preference for products with human-like faces. Think Mr. Clean, the Geico gecko, the M&M characters. Those mascots aren't designed that way by accident. Lonely customers buy more of them. There's a 2023 study that tracked spending in US households after divorce or the death of a partner. Pet spending didn't just go up, it went up specifically for high companionship pets, the ones the owner could project a personality onto. The global pet care industry, by the way, is roughly $171 billion. Not all of that is loneliness, but some of it is. So that's the basic shape. Loneliness puts the body in a low-grade survival state. The survival state shortens your time horizon.
The shortened time horizon makes you a better customer for anything that delivers a hit of social feeling right now. And the modern economy has gotten extremely good at finding people in that state and giving them somewhere to put their money. Mark, on the couch, with the running shoes. He isn't broken. He's responding to a real signal in a way the people selling him things are counting on. Now, what does this actually cost? The math is ugly. Take Mark's shoes, roughly $340 a pop. 3 pairs in a month, that's about $1,000. Multiply by 12, and you're at $12,000 a year, spent on things he doesn't use. Money that, if invested in a low-cost index fund instead, would compound. As an illustration, assume a 7% real return, the rough historical average for US stocks after inflation, no guarantees. $12,000 a year for 20 years becomes around $490,000. Over 30 years, around $1.13 million. That's a model, not a promise. Real markets crash. Inflation eats things. Sequence of returns risk is brutal if you retire into a downturn. The point is not that you'll be a millionaire if you stop buying shoes. The point is that the cost of the loneliness loop, compounded over a working life, isn't a few $100s. It's a different life. And here's where it gets worse. Mark doesn't pay cash for most of this. He pays with a credit card. The average APR on US credit card balances that actually carry interest was about 22% as of late 2025, per Federal Reserve data. Total US credit card debt is over $1.27 trillion, a record. So when the lonely 11 p.m. purchase doesn't get paid off in full, it isn't a $340 purchase anymore. At 22% interest, carried for a year, it's closer to $415. Carried longer, it's worse. The loneliness tax compounds on the wrong side of the ledger. Now for the part most people don't see coming. The temptation is to imagine some shadowy room of marketers cackling about how to exploit lonely people. That isn't really what's happening. What's happening is more boring and more durable. Companies don't have to plot. They run experiments. They A/B test. The ads that sell more win. The ads that sell less die. Over decades, the version of the economy that survives is the version that's gotten extremely efficient at finding emotional vulnerability and offering a product that briefly relieves it. You don't need a conspiracy for this. You just need natural selection on advertising. So when a streaming service tells you you'll never miss a moment, when a delivery app shows you food arriving to your door, when a luxury brand sells you a logo as a way of being seen, none of that is accidental. It's the survivors of 100 million tests on what makes people whose nervous systems are saying, "You are alone," reach for their phones. There's something else worth flagging. The word tax in loneliness tax is doing a lot of work. A real tax is involuntary and goes to a government. The loneliness tax is something else. It's a price you pay to private companies because of a vulnerability you didn't choose to have. It is not your fault that humans are social animals. It is not a moral failing that your brain prefers connection. But the bill still arrives. And it arrives unevenly. Here's a number that should sit with you. In a 2024 Harvard survey, 29% of Americans earning under $30,000 a year said they were lonely.
For people earning over $100,000, it was 18%. Lower income, more loneliness. And lower income, less margin to absorb the loneliness tax when it gets paid. The people who can least afford the compensatory spending are the most likely to do it. That isn't a coincidence. Tight money means fewer dinners out, fewer trips, fewer activities, fewer of the ordinary things that build the social fabric that protects you from feeling this way in the first place. So you get a doom loop. Less money, less connection. Less connection, more loneliness. More loneliness, more compensatory spending. More compensatory spending, less money. Round and round. And this is where the obvious answer turns out to be wrong. If you watch enough finance videos, the answer will sound like this. More discipline. Track your spending. Use a budgeting app. Set a 24-hour rule on any non-essential purchase. Stop being weak. White-knuckle your way through it. That advice isn't useless, but it misses the point. Asking a chronically lonely brain to white-knuckle restraint is a little like asking a chronically hungry person to just stop thinking about food. The willpower runs out, the biology wins, and then the person feels worse, broke and lonely, and now also ashamed, which makes the next bad purchase more likely, not less. The real intervention is upstream. It isn't the budgeting app. It's the thing the budgeting app can't fix.
The cheapest, most effective anti-spending tool most people have access to is a regular, low-pressure social rhythm. A standing Tuesday dinner with the same two friends, a pick-up basketball league, a weekly walk with a neighbour, a volunteer shift, a book club nobody takes too seriously. The specifics don't matter. What matters is the rhythm, something that recurs without needing to be redecided every week. Why does this work? Because it lowers the underlying signal. The nervous system stops shouting, "You are alone." The cortisol comes down. The brain's time horizon stretches back out. The 11 p.m. purchase loses its gravity. You walk past the shoes. That's not magic, it's just removing the source of the demand instead of fighting the symptoms. There's a second piece, and this one is colder. A lot of compensatory spending happens through specific channels. Phone in hand, app already open, payment method already saved, one-click checkout. The friction is gone. So the cheapest discipline tool that actually works isn't willpower, it's friction. Delete the apps, sign out of stored payment methods, make the lonely Wednesday purchase take 90 seconds of typing instead of 3 taps. Most of those purchases die in those 90 seconds. This isn't morally heroic, it's just admitting that your brain at 11 p.m. isn't the same brain that made the budget on Sunday morning, and arranging your environment so the Sunday version wins more often. Now, is this the whole story? No. Here's where this kind of video usually oversells itself. There are people whose financial trouble has nothing to do with loneliness. People whose income is genuinely too low to save, no matter how connected they are. People dealing with medical bills, divorce, layoffs, caregiving, the real cost of living in expensive cities. The loneliness frame doesn't apply to all of them, and pretending it does would be dishonest. There are also people who are deeply connected and still spend recklessly. Loneliness isn't the only driver of compensatory consumption. Boredom does it. Anxiety does it. Identity building does it. Some people just like nice things and have decided, with full information, to trade money for them. That's a valid choice. The argument here is narrower. For a meaningful slice of people who can't figure out where their money is going, people who keep promising to do better next month and don't, the missing variable isn't financial knowledge, it's a social one. And until that variable is addressed, the budgeting tools are going to keep failing them. Here's what to actually do with this, if anything. First, notice your purchases. Not all of them, just the ones that feel a little strange the next morning. The ones where the version of you that bought it doesn't quite match the version of you reading the receipt. Those are the data points. Track when they happen. Most people will find a pattern. time of day, day of week, often after a stretch alone. Second, instead of fighting the impulse, address the underlying signal. Pick one recurring social rhythm, just one, something that happens every week without you having to decide each time. The math here is brutal in your favor. A $25 dinner with friends every Tuesday over a year costs about $1,300. One bad month of compensatory spending can easily eat that. The dinner is the cheaper option. It also makes the bad month less likely. Third, add friction to the channels you spend through. Delete the shopping apps. Turn off saved payment methods. The goal isn't to never buy anything. The goal is to make the buying take long enough for the rest of your brain to catch up. And fourth, be honest about what's hard. If you're isolated because you moved, or because of a breakup, or because you're working remote, or because the friends you used to have drifted, none of that is fixed in a week. Building the social rhythm takes time. You'll probably feel awkward. You'll probably want to bail. The brain that's been alone too long is not great at re-entering rooms. Do it anyway. Cheaper than $1,000 of running shoes. The thing nobody tells you about money is that a lot of personal finance is actually personal. It's not the spreadsheet, it's the life behind the spreadsheet. The numbers follow. If this hit closer to home than expected, that's worth sitting with. Subscribe if you'd like more of this kind of thing. And if you know someone who's been quietly buying things at midnight lately, send this to them. They'll either thank you or pretend they didn't see it. Either is fine.